in Britain, for example, I think a developer quite often is the sort of lone wolf. I think it's a mix of planning regulation, building regulation, funding, red tape and legals, and risk. Problem with modular or semi-modular or modern methods of construction is you build so quick, if your sales don't catch up, you end up with too much stock or work in progress. And that is disastrous for a small business.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Architecture. I'm your host, Rion Willard. And today I'm delighted to welcome an award-winning architect and developer who's truly shaping the future of housing, David Cross. As the founder of Coda, one of South Yorkshire's and the UK's multidisciplinary architecture practices, David has earned a distinguished reputation for tackling the often overlooked missing middle of the housing market. His development ventures include Skyhouse, Co. and Big City, which focus on innovative solutions for first-time buyers, downsizers, and both urban and rural communities. David is often hailed as a purveyor of gentle density, natural sustainability, and architecture that is as robust as it is timeless. His passion for terraced housing and linear master plans run through all of his work. Alongside his projects, David has lectured at Sheffield Hallam University and has taken to the international stage as a keynote speaker and panelist, particularly on topics of regeneration and housing. So very thrilled to have him today to explore his journey and his business career. We will be discussing the selling of an architecture practice and what a successful succession plan actually looks like. We'll talk about the business model, the very powerful business model of Skyhouse as architect developer and the other vertically integrated delivery services that it includes. And we'll look at why the architect developer business model is such an important pathway to dealing with the housing crisis. So those of you who are, again, interested in the architect developer business model, this one really is not one to miss. So sit back, relax, and of course, enjoy David Cross. This episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, Business of Architecture's flagship program to help you structure your firm for freedom, fulfillment, and financial profit. If you want access for our free training on how to do this, please visit smartpracticemethod.com. Or if you want to speak directly to one of our advisors about how he might be able to help you, please follow the link in the information. David, welcome to the Business of Architecture. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Pleasure to be speaking with you. So you are originally an architect. You've worked at practices across the country. You've been the chairman of Coda Studios, and currently you are now the CEO of Skyhouse, and a purveyor, in your own words, of gentle density, a placemaker, and a house builder, and actually kind of dealing with a very important aspect of housing that we see is a kind of a challenge right across certainly in the sort of the Western world, if you like, of the disappearance of the starter home or the disappearance of the middle income housing. And you know, it's quite extraordinary, really, the sort of challenges and how difficult it is for people to get onto the housing market and that sort of gap. And Skyhouse is an endeavor to challenge that and to combat it. So perhaps we just launch straight in, and you could give us a little journey of how did you get to found Skyhouse, and perhaps you could explain what is it? How would you describe what it is?
I think you missed off the bio something about a purveyor of linear master plans. So I was brought up in a northern town called Barnsley, which is famous for coal mining.
Right.
And actually there's a great Netflix program at the moment called Strike about coal mining. So I grew up in a terraced house, which is effectively what I class as the missing middle of housing now in the UK. And I know America's got its same issues you just said about that missing gap in the house market. So I grew up in a terraced house. My dad was a DIY enthusiast, knocking the house about, changing the house, adapting the house. And other than wanting to be a Top Gun fighter pilot, I thought I'd like to be an architect. I was good at art. I was interested in building from seeing my dad doing all the work. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to be an architect. So that's kind of the starting point, is terrace housing in industrial north of England.
Mm-hmm. And when you became an architect and you're working in practice, what was a lot of your experience about, and some of the kind of insights that have kind of shaped your worldview on architecture?
Well, I started in practice doing healthcare in a
Hmm.
place in Oxford, which I really enjoyed. But then when I qualified, I moved back north into a city called Sheffield, and I worked for a practice called Axis. And Axis were probably at the front end of the sort of urban renewal part of the market, which was just starting in its infancy. So you think of New York lofts, London apartments, Manchester apartments, and this was like the sort of practice doing it in Sheffield. So we were converting old cutlery factories into apartments. And I just absolutely loved doing mixed use, city centre, residential, that kind of boutique architecture, adaptive, and just fell in love with it. I also did some quite high end housing schemes, but that never really floated my boat. I think
Mm.
the architecture with budget is sort of easy in a way when you've got unlimited budget and a great client. But I started becoming more and more fascinated with how do we solve the macro housing problem of affordability, beauty, sustainability, and urban renewal. And that's kind of what Coda was as a practice. And from there, I started doing my own developments with funnily enough, a business partner. My business partner was a banker in London who also grew up in a terraced house in Barnsley. So when I found my first development opportunity, I called in and said, "Do you fancy having a pop at this with me?" And he said, "Yes." So we started Crossbow, which was my name, Cross, and his
Mhm.
part of his surname, Bow, was our first development company, which still exists to this day. But that was predicated more on sort of apartment schemes and selling to investors off plan. But the sort of germ of the idea, the kernel of the idea of missing middle was already there. It just took a few more years to come out, and that's when Skyhouse was bought.
Mhm. And what's the kind of business model then of Skyhouse? Are you a developer, or is it more of a traditional architecture practice, or is it a mix of the two?
Yeah, well, I class us as a house builder placemaker. So
Mhm.
in Britain, for example, I think a developer quite often is the sort of lone wolf, d- outsources everything from architecture, design, project management, contracting. So with Crossbow, that was our model. The problem with that model when we were working on projects that were say 3 million to 10 million, picking a contractor was very difficult. A tier one contractor could be quite expensive and litigious. And then a tier three, tier four might not have the balance sheet or the power to see the project through. So some
Yeah.
of our projects were great successes, others were failures. And the common denominator in that was the quality of the contractor. So I eventually sold the practice. So I grew Coda from 2003 to 2020, sold the practice then and said to Ian, "Look, I think we should bring it all in-house and be a proper business." So I class us now as a proper placemaking house builder, not the traditional developer. So we do everything in-house. I still do the master plans for my design fix. I still design the house types, play around with the typologies, some of the interiors, the kitchen designs, even down to that granular level.
Mhm.
We've got project managers, QSs, site managers, assistant site managers, branding, everything. I think we've got about 36 people in the team at the moment. Um, and if you think about, I sold the business in 2020 and started Skyhouse proper it was about March 2020, just in lockdown one.
Mhm.
By summer of that year, Ryan joined us as construction director MD. And by the following January, so January 21, we were a fully fledged house builder doing everything in house, which was probably not the right time looking back, given it
Right.
was COVID, post COVID. And then we had all the sort of massive inflationary period with the war in Ukraine, gas prices. And then we had the disastrous trust quartering budget in the UK with gilts flying up through the roof and interest rates following. So yeah, it's been a challenging period to be a startup house builder.
Mhm. Amazing, this kind of journey there. In terms of selling the practice, selling Coda, and kind of beginning this new venture, what were some of the things that led you? Because that's a big decision to want to sell a practice. Was it something that you'd already planned for? Did the opportunity just kind of emerge organically, or was it a succession plan?
Kind of goes all the way back to the beginning in a weird way, in a bizarre way, which I never thought of at the time. But I worked at Axis, really enjoyed it. I realized I'd reached the ceiling in the practice. I thought I need to try some. They were about 20 strong, 25 strong as a practice, brilliant experience. Worked with a phenomenally talented architect called Kevin Sears. And I thought, I've got to move on, do something different, try the corporate practice. Went to a larger firm. I'll not mention the names. I hated it. Got told off for wearing flip-flops. And I thought, kind of, this is not for me, really. So I was building a house at the time, and I phoned my bank manager, Brian, and said, Brian, I hate my job. Can I leave? And he said, of course you can. I said, but I've got this self-build mortgage. And he said, yeah, fine, you've got it now. Just do what you want. So I went on my own as a one-man band. And I was working from the front room of my terrace house, and I called the practice Front Room Architects. I managed to land a reasonably big contract. And one of the directors of that business that was building the contractor said, the name Front Room's a bit parochial. You need to think of something else. And by then I started landing more projects, more city centre projects, and managed to drag an old business partner, Mark, kicking and screaming from Axis as well. And we were playing around with different names. And rather than going down the traditional route of saying the Cross Hobbs Partnership or something like that, I said, we need something that's a bit more of a word about what we do and so on. And I'm a terrible musician. I was playing the guitar one day and I saw a DSL coda, and in my mind it meant to start at the beginning. And it doesn't mean that, but in my mind it was a great name, Coda. So that was the name. I texted Mark and he said, yeah, that's a great name. So we called it Coda. So even at that point, I wanted the practice to outlive the name. Then we moved into an old co-op shop, which was probably a 1905 Edwardian property. And when we were doing the little refurb on it, we networked it for 10 spaces. We had a reception and room for 10 people, but we'd said when we started the business, let's not employ anyone for a number of years. But we somehow decided to network it for 10 people. And very quickly we employed our first member of staff, and it sort of grew from there. And the business grew and grew. And actually the turning point for me was the great financial crash, because the business was largely an accidental business. I was an architect. I was a businessman. We'd stumbled upon this work stream. We'd got loads of great clients doing great urban renewal projects in the north of England. And the business was just ticking over great. We didn't think about marketing plans. We didn't think about financial forecasts. We just opened the doors on a Monday morning and work came in and cash flow was fine. And then the crash hit us. And I can remember floundering around for about a year, struggling with the bank. In that period, we bought a few properties together. So the bank saying, well, you're a bit exposed and all this. It was an awful time. And then weirdly on LinkedIn, a guy called Larry messaged me and said, why don't you come and look at Vistage? And I'd never heard of Vistage. And it's an American setup. It's kind of a peer-to-peer with a chairman organization where you help each other run better businesses. I went to a tasting session and just absolutely loved it. It was therapy, it was training, it was everything all wrapped up in one. And I started professionalizing the business after that, looking at systems and procedures and protocols, mission, vision, values, project tracking, software, all sorts of stuff, and just
amazing.
Built the business properly, ground up.
Amazing.
Not really ground up. We were probably 5, 6, 7 years old by then, and just started stitching into the business then professional systems and designing the organogram for how the business should work. And the business sort of took off again by 2013 and grew and grew and grew. By 2014, I was doing Crossbow with Ian. My passion was I was realizing that I was more interested in developing, and then offered some of the other guys in the business the chance to buy me out. It sort of split the business. There was what I call the young guns and the old guard. So the original guys that I was in business was thought they would lead the business. The young guns felt that they were the most valuable people, and they couldn't decide between them how to buy me out. And in the end, we sort of called off the MBO, and then we carried on trading. And then one day I was coming back from Wales with family, and my old business partner said, look, rather than us buy you out, why don't you buy us out, i.e. the old guard? So we did. I bought out the old guard. So it was me and the young guns, and we cracked on. And then we started talking about succession planning. I put Matt into Vistage, and I moved out of the office as chairman. Matt became MD. I was there helping just nudge the steering wheel every now and again, making sure they were okay. They did 2 years. And then we said, right, do you want to go for it? But there were some rumours in the British press around the tax breaks were going to change for selling your business. So my accountant said, look, if you're going to sell the business, you've got to do it fast because there might be will be an entrepreneur's relief. And this was, I think, Friday. By Monday, we had a drink together and they agreed to buy the business. And Tuesday, we went to lawyers and signed the document. We did it all very light touch. It was Wednesday they signed the document. So within about 3 working days, we did a full MBO with due diligence, legal documents, and
Did all the valuation and all that kind of stuff.
we just agreed a price, shook hands, and
Right.
off they went with the business, and off I went. And I can remember sitting in the lawyer's office about to sign, thinking, shit, I've spent 17 years building this, and it was my baby, and it will always be
Yeah.
it's always going to be like your firstborn. And I almost texted my wife to say, are you sure? And if I had, she'd have texted back saying, don't do it. And I didn't text her. I did do it. And when I came home and told her that I was going to text her, oh my God, if you'd have texted me, I'd have said, don't do it. Anyway, I did it, and we moved on, and we started Skyhouse proper. And it was quite scary because you're letting go of something, it like, as I said earlier, like a granular level. I knew the business inside. I knew the team, I knew the staff, and I knew all my clients, my consultants. I knew the heartbeat of it, but I just felt I needed a new challenge. I started Coda when I was 27,
Mm-hmm.
so I was quite young. I'd only been qualified 2 years. So
Yeah.
in a way, and I remember thinking at the time when I was leaving the other practice with the flip flops, thinking, oh, well, if I don't know, I'll just ask Dave Salmons or Fraser, 2 guys I really respect. I've always been good at just put my hand up and asking a question, and if I don't understand, I'll ask a question again and say, can you clarify that? So I've never been afraid of asking, and just thought, yeah, let's go for it, and we did.
Amazing, brilliant. That's a brilliant kind of story of a successful succession plan and kind of just and growing a business, and also very interesting in terms of the what you were the kind of turnaround and how you kind of professionalized the business with the consulting agency, and also kind of actually started to train the next succession of leaders in that as well as running a business, because that's often, we see that a lot with architecture practices, and sort of it's not uncommon. I meet practices who are going through a succession plan, and even after the purchase, I'll have a conversation with the new practice leaders, and they're not in the mindset of being a business owner
Yeah.
or a business leader. They're still architects, and the notion of having to win work or look at the financials, all this kind of stuff, it can be quite overwhelming and not what they always, what they thought they'd signed up for. They thought they were going to be more, it was going to be more architecture, more freedom, and actually it can be quite different. So that's a very kind of good, very wise move there to sort of train the leaders up so they've got the comfort.
It's kind of the heart of Vistage as well. It wasn't just you, it was the next generation. And
Yeah.
I got into architecture. My dad's friend was chairman of a firm, and I had work experience there. So I still believe really strongly in work experience to this day. So I've got a 16-year-old boy coming to my office in a few months to shadow me for a few weeks. And I just think that sort of succession planning, whether it's a 16-year-old, it's actually one of the guys that bought the business from me. He joined us on work experience as a 15-year-old. He didn't go to university to start with. He joined as an apprentice. He went to uni for a bit, didn't like it, and came to me and said, can I leave? And I said, well, it might limit your future progression. He said, I'm not bothered. I love what I do. He trained on the job, and he ended up being a director and owner of the practice. And that was started as a 15-year-old boy.
Amazing. I love those stories. So you kind of started Crossbow, and Crossbow was happening at the end part of Coda.
Yeah.
And then it kind of grew into Skyhouse. And so perhaps, what was the original intention there with Skyhouse, and how did you want to make it different from what you had been doing previously with Coda, and what were the kind of market opportunities that you were seeing were present?
Yeah, again, so it really, Skyhouse and Crossbow started in the great financial crash again, because, and actually even before that, because when you submit a planning application in the UK, quite often you always do a design access statement about why you design what you do, and you might look at historic maps, street scenes, and all that kind of stuff, and context. And every time that we did a development in the city centre, we would look at the historic maps and there would be thousands of back-to-back houses, which for American listeners or viewers, they won't understand that they were sort of houses just back to, I don't know if they've got the same typology in America, but really high density. They were knocked down because of the slums. They were in poor living conditions, damp. But what I loved about the street scenes was this really simple architecture. People that were working and living in the same place. You'd see a little factory next to it, some chimneys, a courtyard, laundry hanging out. And whilst it must have been terrible to live there, you've been cold and hungry and damp and all that kind of stuff, they looked great on photographs. And I thought, we're missing something here about regenerating cities and not just doing apartments. The crash came. UK banks didn't particularly like apartments anymore because for whatever reason, they saw them as high risk. Our entire practice was predicated around mixed-use apartment schemes, ground floor commercial, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 stories of apartments above. And I thought, well, how do we regenerate towns and cities without apartments? And the answer was looking seven in the face, which were the historic back-to-backs. So originally, I started playing around with the idea, calling it back-back. So using the word back and then mirroring the word back. And I thought, well, that's got too many connotations of slums. People might not want to buy a back-to-back house because it's called back-to-back. I started submitting sort of dummy planning applications to the council saying, look, if we did this, would you pass it? Speaking to the agents, if I built this, do you think buyers would like it? The agents loved it. Then I spoke to the chartered surveyors and said, if we built this and the agents could sell them, would you tell the banks that they can lend on it? Yes. So I started squaring the circle before it even got a live site.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you're actually kind of designing the typology and what the buildings could look like. Were you using fictional sites or were you kind
fictional sites. Yeah. So it was literally testing the model, coming up with house type designs that were single aspect, that were back to back, that were 3, 4 stories. And again, 4-story homes in England, you need a fire engineering solution. So testing the building regs, testing the planning policy, testing the market, even talking to people, would you buy this? And everyone agreed it was a good idea. Eventually, a back-to-back housing scheme was passed in Manchester. I sent a press clipping to the planners in Sheffield and said, look, we've been on about this for a long time. And they said, okay, in principle, we'll go for it if you find a site. So that was the sort of green light in theory. By then, we were building a scheme called Dunfields in Kelham Island and a large listed land remediation. The like master developer that brings together huge regeneration projects contacted me and said, we love what you're doing at Kelham Island. Would you do something like that at Waverley? And and they sell land, 10 acres, 20 acres a time to national house builders. So it was quite a privilege to be invited. And I said, yeah. So I designed a scheme and they said, would you really build that here? I said, yeah. So then they moved me from the periphery of the side more into the middle. I redesigned it. Would you really do that? Yeah. And moved into the centre. So we are literally now, we built the first phase of Waverley, which is 44 homes. We ended up building the second phase of 44 homes. We're now building 96 homes and a further phase of 50, all off the back of a back-to-back house typology that they saw and wanted us to bring.
Wow.
Operation site. So the idea was tested around the crash, planned on paper up to about 2014, 15. By about 16, we were talking to this list. It took 2 years for them to actually finally get the land deal. By about 2018, we were on site with our first scheme. By about 2019, the builder had gone bust and we were picking up the pieces of a bankrupt, insolvent development, which cost us £1 million more. But we'd proven the model. People queued to buy the houses. They look fantastic even to this day. And we'd proven the model. We knew we'd got something. And I said to my business partners, look, I think Skyhouse, well, go back to the name. I think Skyhouse has got legs at this point. But I was talking to our branding guys and said, I think a bit like the Front Room name change from Front Room to Coda. I said, back it doesn't convey what we're trying to do with the house. It's too, again, parochial. It got too many connotations of slums and the past which aren't positive. And I said, so we started doing like that word game where you just say, you're firing words off. And they said, well, what is it? And I said, well, it's a house. It's got roof gardens, it's sky, but big windows. You want big windows and sky, and it's a sky house. And I went, that's it. And that was it. And that was just literally firing words out,
Yeah.
And Skyhouse was one of the words that ended up coming out of it, and that's where it stuck. And a bit, I always talk about Coda had its own legs. It grew its own legs as a business and
Mhm.
ran with me not really having to encourage it so much. And Skyhouse was the same. Crossbow didn't find its own legs, but
Mhm.
Skyhouse did. Skyhouse has run, and it's got its own life now. And people like it and want us to bring schemes to their sites. We don't really go out and particularly bid for sites. We get invitations to buy sites, which I think is quite unique.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And who tend to be the kind of vendors of the sites, and how are they
Yeah.
becoming available?
So we've got council site we're
Right.
buying at the moment. We've got national house builders. We're working with one very closely at the minute. And we just finished the development, actually, beautiful development. And they've got, so they bought a big regenerated site, 22 million. And part of that was an old paper mill, some old workers' cottages, and a funny triangular piece of land on a river in a wooded valley. Beautiful site. But that for the national didn't fit their template model with just cookie cutter. And they said, would you buy this site and deliver something special? And we said, yeah. So that was invitation. So the Harworth Group invitation, they've asked us to deliver houses on their sites. So it's, yeah, interesting.
Well, no, I mean, that's a real unique position as a developer, is to kind of be getting first dibs on
Yeah.
these kinds of sites, and that's such one of the most difficult things about any sort of developer activity. One is the finance, and the other is actually finding the locations to be able doing the buildings. Um,
I think with that though, it's opportunistic, and I suppose we are sort of bottom feeding. So it's not
right.
as glamorous as it sounds. We're doing the bit that they don't want to do. But
Hmm.
actually, for me as an architect,
Yeah. Well, it's the
bit that I
fun
really
bit.
want to do. So
Yeah.
I want to take the challenging sites and deliver the nice, restore the old buildings or create nice new places that
Mhm.
challenge. So yeah, it's opportunistic rather than
Well, it's the kind of movement, and something that we advocate for quite a lot is the architect developer model, and even on a small scale, architects are incredibly visionary in being able to take gap sites and see possibility and create something amazing in sites that often get overlooked and that developers aren't willing to spend the time kind of investigating. And sometimes it perhaps is part of the business model that as a developer, when you're hiring an architect to kind of just investigate random bits of land, that something breaks down and doesn't work as well as something much more formulaic.
mm,
So bringing the architectural vision and being able to take on a challenging site suddenly puts you at
um,
quite an advantage. Do you do all of the architectural work in house, or do you
so,
just do the kind of master planning kind of concept part and typology part, and then
yeah. So
you,
I do the master planning. So we've got like probably around 26 templates, if you like. I've stopped using the word typology, making it more like a template or a chassis. We're trying to make sure we get the efficiencies and repetition of building and learning the house types and what works. So originally, my old firm did the architecture, and now it's becoming a bit more simple to do. We've got a couple of smaller firms that we work with. A one-man band guy who's fantastic, who knows his way around the technical side of architecture. We've got Ross in-house, a passive house designer and architectural technician. He tends to be more design manager now rather than actually drawing stuff.
Right.
We sort of outsource, but with a very, very close eye from me, Ross,
Mhm.
making sure it's what we want. Yeah.
So what does the internal structure look like in Skyhouse these days then? Like what kind of expertise do you have in-house? And what part of the kind of the development process and the construction process are you actually, you're delivering services to the projects yourselves, and which parts do you tend to
Well,
liaise in?
yeah. So we design and build and sell. So, and sometimes retain the buildings as investments.
Right, so you're selling it as well as
Yeah.
the actual kind of
So we have
construction and
in-house sales, yeah. So we really, if you think about a main contractor, we are a main contractor as well.
right.
So whilst we don't particularly have bricklayers or joiners on the books,
Mhm.
our construction team will subcontract the packages. So from groundworks, substructures, roof, electrics, plumbing. So we have the project managers, the QSs, the procurement teams to do all of that. So it's effectively a contracting outfit with a sales arm and a design arm.
Mm-hmm. And so typically these are always built to sell, or do you hold on to any of them as a kind of rental portfolio?
Yeah. So the initial idea was to sell on the open market. So that's most of our schemes historically have been that way. But given the UK housing market, I think it might be the same in America, it's a bit challenging with interest rates. We've been very fortunate that because we do urban schemes that are in generally urban locations, city centres or city fringe, it's become very popular for the single family residential sort of BTR, PRS market. So we've done a couple of institutional deals now with pension funds, investment houses, and we expect to do a lot more of that going forward because we are niche. We deliver in urban locations where the rents are higher, car-free schemes, design-driven, eco-driven, robust in its architecture. So I try to make sure that everything we do isn't faddy as well in terms of materials can date, can damage, can be hard to replace. And I want the houses to be as robust and durable as the terrace house I grew up in. So I joke about a thing called the scooter test. My little boy, he isn't a little boy anymore, he's 16, but when he was a little boy, if he crashed his scooter into the wall and dented or broke a cladding panel, and that cladding panel no longer available, how do you fix the house? And I think it's something beautiful when, especially in the north of England as well, where it's rainy and damp. Materials can weather quite badly, whereas natural materials like brick and stone and timber tend to weather and patina quite nicely. So I want that robustness to be in every job that we do, so it looks good in 20 years, 30 years. So yeah.
In terms of the kind of challenge that you're kind of directly helping solve, the kind of that middle housing disappearance. As if we just step back for a moment, like why has this section of housing disappeared? Like from your perspective, and you've got a really unique perspective here of like architect, developer, business person, and there's this massive housing crisis that's kind of existing. Why is it such a challenge? There's no shortage of technological solutions and architects who can do great ideas. There's clearly a lot of other components here. What's your perspective on this?
If I take it right back to when I started in practice in 1999, 2000, when I worked for Axis, we had a whole plethora of small developers that were fleet of foot, creative, entrepreneurial. And bit by bit, the planning system became more complex. So you'd originally submit a site plan, a location plan, floor plans, elevations, not even a section necessarily. And that was it. The planning form, the planning fee, and off you went. That was it. And then it became more complex with ground investigations, acoustic reports, soil investigations, you name it. Report after report after report. And that's got more and more complex and more expensive. Around the time of the crash, a lot of those developers went bust. So that niche urban market or smaller developer disappeared. I think the funding finance market is very complicated as well. So banks are less trusting of the smaller builders. So it's balance sheet driven. It requires much more money invested in the project. The legal complexity of securing funding is a nightmare. Collateral warranties. So it's become a very professionalized industry, really. Availability of land is really difficult in England as well. Brownfield is less tricky in places like Sheffield, but the greenfield sites, you have to go through strategic planning. And then house builders have got huge portfolios of land and a pipeline of land. So Barratt's might build 17,000 homes a year. It's dominated by 4 or 5 house builders in the UK. So really, you've got two ends of the spectrum. You've got the national house builder building the cookie cutter model, and then you add the urban developer that disappeared. That urban developer now has been replaced by the PRS pension fund.
Right.
Huge developments, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 million pound PRS apartment schemes. But they're tricky to do now because of the Building Safety Act with the Grenfell fire. So we're seeing that we've got the polar ends of the market: purpose-built student accommodation, PRS in the cities, national house builder in the suburbs. Then you had, in the olden days, you had councils that were building houses, affordable houses. They were sold off under right to buy. Housing associations now build ostensibly the same model as the national house builder. So it's a suburban cul-de-sac driven model. You've got a whole missing middle there, which is bungalows courtyard houses, townhouses, row houses, terrace houses, back-to-back houses, duplexes, fourplexes, with American terms. We don't do that. But that's where we that's where we want to specialize, that missing middle, that gentle density, where you might not necessarily want a garden, you might not necessarily want parking space. And historically in Britain, that was quite tricky to get planning permission for. You had to have 2 parking spaces. You had to have a 50 square metre garden. You had to have 21 metres window to window. Well, that creates a very formulaic urban design solution, which is actually really dull and Americanized. And that's all we get as new builds. And then there are very few niche developers like us doing the urban infills, the car-free developments, the funky stuff. So I think it's a mix of planning regulation, building regulation, funding, red tape and legals, and risk. Yeah.
With planning and kind of planning regulations, do you campaign for change, or do you have any kind of advisory roles or positions where you're able to actually kind of consult with planning departments or anything kind of higher up to advise on, these are the things that we should be doing in order to actually unlock a lot of kind of housing potential?
Yes. So under the previous government, there was a group I was in called an all-party parliamentary group for housing growth and delivery, which was effectively a load of people with, it could be planning consultants, architects, house builders, social housing, national housing, but people that were in that group were there to try to lobby government to say, look, here are the challenges that we've got. This is what we need to help. So I've drafted various papers on how to help people like me, my business, SMEs, with the challenges of navigating the planning system. So, for example, it costs probably around £250,000 for a planning application now for 50 homes. It might cost another 50 to 100,000 for us to access finance. And for a business like ours, we might need 2 or 3 of them rolling at any time. Well, that ties up an enormous amount of cash. And then if you think about the end of the project that we've got now, where we've got stock sat unsold because of high interest rates, we end up becoming involuntary landlords. Well, we really want to do is keep churning. So yeah, the APPG, which is now a parliamentary liaison group, we try to do that. And I'm also on the South Yorkshire Mayor's Business Advisory Board, which doesn't have any lobbying or advisory in terms of changing national policy, but it gives me the ability to speak to the Mayor directly about the challenges facing our region in particular, which is South Yorkshire, the Sheffield City region.
In terms of finance, how do you guys typically develop your kind of financial stack, if you like? Do you use a lot of your own money? Are you using kind of banks, investings, outside investors?
So the original projects when we did Crossbow were seed investment from Ian. I did the work, he put the initial cash in, and we would sell off plan using investors' money. So they used to pay up to 50% deposit, which was fantastic. Then unfortunately, there were a few rogue developers around that time that ran off with people's money. So the 50% deposit shrank to about 20%. And then I think the maximum you can now do legally is around 10%. And again, that's further shortened the market for the number of SMEs, because that was a great source of seed cash. So that was the original projects. We were then fortunate to access Homes England, which is government. So effectively acting as a bank. So Homes England now are the largest lender to SMEs in the UK, which is an astonishing fact, really, if you think about they lend more to SMEs than the high street banks.
Wow.
Which is a terrible indictment to the housing market, really, that high street banks won't lend to SMEs. So we've done a couple of deals with Homes England. And then I think, fortunately, because I think what we try to do is placemaking, semi-modular, so trying to build quicker, more efficiently, design-driven. We've got all sorts of sustainable things that we try to do, zero gas, hedgehog highway, swift bricks, all that kind of stuff. We sort of stumbled upon probably the best funding package I've heard of in this industry, which is we're now funded by the South Yorkshire Pension Authority through a funding management company called St Bride's. And effectively, they've given us almost a revolving credit facility, which is market leading in terms of interest rate and the loan to value that they've given us, and what they want us to do is deliver homes, beautiful homes, sustainable homes, create jobs. And we do that with gusto. So we've got a really, really phenomenal funding position with.
Is that connected with the REITs where
No,
no, it's not.
if you work for the local authority in South Yorkshire, whether it's Barnsley, Rotherham, Doncaster, Sheffield, if you're a planner, anything to do with the civil service, your pension goes into the South Yorkshire Pension Authority pot. They
Right. Okay.
have AC fit, and we're just part of a small, sort of diversified pot that they're trying to do to deliver more housing. So it's
Right.
a brilliant initiative, and I think
Amazing. Yeah.
actually wouldn't surprise me under Keir Starmer's government if that's something that's going to be rolled out more, with maybe Homes England's help, with maybe private pension funds also getting involved to share the load. So yeah, we're very lucky to access that. It's helped us grow the business way quicker than we could have without it. Yeah.
And then you find that that's better than kind of working with private investors who want to come in and invest a large capital amount.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the Vistage thing. Do we want to give away equity or not? At this moment, we don't. We've got a growth plan. We'll have an exit at some point from the business. I'm 48 now. My other main business partner's 52, I think, years. So a few years left. We've got people in Vistage in the business as well already. We've got trading schemes. We've got mentoring schemes. So, rather than giving equity away, yeah, it's much better to do it this way. Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about then the kind of challenges or the construction part of it. What your involvement is in the management of the construction and the kind of general contractor position that you hold, and then we can talk a little bit about the kind of the real estate part of it, because it's a really wonderful sort of fully vertically integrated.
Yeah. So on the construction side, I've got Rion, who's the construction MD. Ryan's very capable. He's quite young, actually. I always forget how young. I think he's about 33, 34. He runs the construction side. We've got a team, I think under Ryan must be 20 people, perhaps. I don't get that involved construction-wise. I understand construction, detailing, but I try not to micromanage because I piss them off a lot. Because I'm the architect that wants to change the detail or change this. I want this nice brick arch, but the QS wants to get rid of the arch because it's too expensive. So I'd visit site. I'm involved in some decisions on things like that and technical solutions, but I try not to micromanage on that side.
And then in terms of the kind of real estate part of the organization, you've got brokers who are selling the houses to like kind of basically the end consumer.
Yeah, so we had our own Rightmove portal at one point, which wasn't very good. But yes, we use external agents. So it could be local agents, it could be national agents, it could be international agents, I guess. So they will deliver the leads to us, and in-house we've got Bajena, she's our head of sales, and she deals with the sales. Or I might deal with the bulks. I quite like the sales side, so I might deal with some of the pension funds that we're dealing with or partners and try and broker the deals directly myself. In terms of appraising the sites, I tend to master plan them, run the initial fag packet appraisal, as I call it, then on to Ryan to check and sense check from a construction side. Are the numbers in there okay? We've got Richard, who's head of procurement. He'll check the budgets and go, yeah, the outturn on this project is roughly that, so we know we're in the right ballpark. Are the prelims right? The overhead right? Have we got enough contingency in, and so on and so forth? And yeah. So I'm quite involved from a very early part all the way to the end, and sometimes I might be quite immersed, and other times might not be immersed. So my workload can be quite sporadic in terms of very busy to not very busy at all.
Do you find that you sell more of the homes to individual people, or do you get mass buyers who kind of buy quite a lot of units at once, and then they have their own kind of rental organization happening with it, or do you try and stop that? Or
the original model was to really sell to the open market, but the problem at the moment is that the buyer demand isn't there. Again, in England, we've probably priced buyers out to the market with regulation. The standards, air source heat pumps, EV chargers, PV, it's quite expensive to build. So at the moment, the market is a bit subdued. We are selling still to the open market, but our model will be it definitely will be to split it, what I've called a Tri-Tenure model. So 30% open market, 70% partnership, and that could be local authorities, it could be registered providers who are affordable housing providers, it could be family offices, it could be individual buy-to-let investors, or it could be institutional investors. So we get faster exits. The problem with modular or semi-modular or modern methods of construction is you build so quick, if your sales don't catch up, you end up with too much stock or work in progress. And that is disastrous for a small business. We need to be a conveyor belt. So we think we've learned after this, 4 years, that actually we can't rely on the open market for all of our exits. We need to make sure we're blended.
Right. Well, and if you, let's say that you kind of get a bit of a bottleneck with stock and you can't sell it as quickly as you need to, what happens to the stock? Is it then just become too complicated to be able to rent it
No.
and then hold on to it?
Yeah.
Or
Well, actually, we're in that situation right now. Actually, we've got probably too much weight, Waverley Central, but we've got institutional buyers that are looking at buying stock offers now. Which the benefit of what we've done with the model is our price point. Really, apart from a few houses, is perfect for the rental model. From a 1-bed to a 3-bed house, it fits the model, so its end value is actually not far off its yield value. So we've been quite lucky in that regard.
Amazing. And at the moment, you're kind of quite geographically focused in the area that you are up and around Sheffield and north. Is there any plans to expand it elsewhere or other parts of the country?
Yeah, I would love to. My wife, probably less so. She works in the business. I think sometimes I'm quite bombastic and ambitious, and then that can run away with me. We're probably just going to go through a little period now where we calm down a bit, retrench a little bit, and then make sure we know what we're doing, because we've grown very quickly over the last 4 years from really me, Ian and Philip to about, I think we had at peak about 42 people. It's been really fast, high pace, high pressure, with lots of global events like COVID, post-COVID, Ukraine, interest rates, and so on. It's been a whirlwind that I think we might need to just take stock for the next couple of years. But ask me again in the year, we'll probably be in Manchester.
Love it.
Near
I love it.
London. Yeah.
Do you think there's quite a big difference between the housing markets between the north and the south in the UK?
No, I think the benefit of this, is it a benefit? The south is very expensive and there's a huge shortage. I think Skyhouse would work anywhere in the UK. We've got, I talk about our sort of opportunistic approach. We'll problem solve. So we will deliver our single level dwellings, bungalows, in a rural location or an urban location. It could be a luxury bungalow or a urban terrace bungalow. So our Outerbridge site is a rural urban scheme. So it's a restoration of an old paper mill sat in the middle of hundreds of acres of woodland and riverside, but it's an urban type scheme. So we can go anywhere with that model. It could be in a historic setting. We can use our templates and dress the building to suit a historic setting. It could be very contemporary. We chose to abandon the robustness. We could use a cladding system. So yeah, I think the model could work anywhere, and I don't think the housing market in the UK is dramatically different anywhere.
Amazing, brilliant. I mean, that was fantastic, Darren. It's a perfect place to conclude. Maybe one last question: what's the plan for the rest of 2025 and beyond?
This year is all about positivity. It's about coming out of the last 2 years, which have been very tough. We're moving office next week. And yeah, stabilizing, ready for the next growth. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you, David. That's been a real kind of mind-blowing conversation, actually, of a really incredible sort of business career and some extraordinary ventures. And thank you very much for coming on and sharing.
No problem. Thank you.
And that's a wrap.
Hey, Enoch Sears here, and I have a request. Since you are a listener here of the Business of Architecture podcast, Ryan and I, we love putting this podcast together. We love sharing information as much as we can glean from all the other industries that we're a part of to bring it back to empower you as an architect and a designer. And one thing that helps us in our mission is the growth of this podcast, simply because it helps other architects stand for more of their value, spreads the business information that we're sharing to empower architects together, so architects, designers, engineers can really step into their greatness, whatever that looks like for each individual. And so here my simple ask is for you to join us and be part of our community by doing the following: heading over to iTunes and leaving a review of the podcast. And as an expression of our sincere thanks, we would like to give you a free CEU course that can get you one professional development unit, but more importantly, will give you a very solid and firm foundation on your journey to becoming a profitable and thriving architect. So here's the process for that. After you leave us a review, send an email to support@businessofarchitecture.com. Let us know the username that you use to leave the review, and we will send you that free training. On the training, you'll discover what 99% of architecture firm owners wish they would have known 20 years ago. And the other 1%, well, they just didn't even know that they didn't know. Head over to iTunes and leave us a review now.
We'd like to acknowledge the following smart practice firms in the 200, 300, and 400 clubs. The 200 Club means these firms have achieved a financial performance of earning $200,000 or more of revenue per employee, which puts them in the top 10% of small firms worldwide. To find out more about this prestigious award and how you can apply for recognition, go to businessofarchitecture.com/200. The 400 Club, Drew and Justine Tyndall. 300 Club, Christopher Rollins, Jorge Catrain, and Christopher Brandon. 200 Club, Julia Aria, Philip Lang, Sean Kakigi. Yogesh Mistry, Marina Rubina, Ryan Smith, Brad Hubble and Suzanne Daly. Peter Spruance, Frank and Megan Lynn. Well done, team. Let's go. This episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, Business of Architecture's flagship program to help you structure your firm for freedom, fulfillment, and financial profit. If you want access for our free training on how to do this, please visit smartpracticemethod.com. Or if you want to speak directly to one of our advisors about how we might be able to help you, please follow the link in the information. Hello listeners, we hope you're enjoying our show. We love bringing you these insightful conversations, but we couldn't do it without the support of our amazing sponsors. If you're a business owner or know someone who would be an excellent fit for our audience, we'd love to hear from you. Partnering with us means your brand will reach over 40,000 engaged listeners each month. Interested in becoming a sponsor? Please send us an email at support@businessofarchitecture.com. The views expressed on this show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract, bond, or commitment, except to help you be unstoppable.